by Harry Kolotas.
There you are, do come in. Good to see you again.
You too, Mr. Littleworth.
Firstly, let me say how sorry I was that I couldn't be at the funeral. Unfortunately, I was in court with a client that afternoon.
No, that's fine. I didn't expect you to come. I mean, it was all so sudden. Still can't quite believe he's gone.
Well, even though he was getting on in years, it's always a shock when you lose a loved one, isn't it?
Yes, well, to be honest with you, Dad and I, we weren't that close. He sort of shut me out of his life in a way.
Yes, I think it would be fair to say that your father struggled to come to terms with a conventional family lifestyle.
Well, it was his only son. You'd think he might have made more effort.
Yes, you left home at quite a young age, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes, right after my mother died. I was 18. Couldn't wait to get out. And to be honest, Dad and I, we had a falling out over money.
Sorry to hear that. Your father was always very careful with money, even though he had a lot of it.
Exactly, which is what made me so angry when he made a big deal about it. I mean, I asked for a small amount. I asked for £5,000. 5,000! It's not a lot, is it?
Certainly not to your father, it wasn't. He was a very wealthy man.
Yes, it was only to help me get started in my own place. And do you know what he said? Not a pound more out of me, not while I yet live and breathe. I mean, he could be a pompous prick when the mood took him. Excuse my language.
No, not at all. That sounds exactly like your father, yes. But, perhaps he didn't want to cough up the money because he didn't want to see you leave home.
No, I don't think that bothered him much at all. To be honest, he pretty much just got on with his own life.
Yes, and I understand that travel was a big part of his life. Is that correct?
Always.
He had lots of acquaintances all over the world. Anyway, moving swiftly on, I understand the other long-term standing member of the household up until his death last week was, I refer to my notes here, Mrs. Pearl Angel Magdalene Madonna Tyndon. I believe she was your mother's maid originally, but agreed to stay on to maintain the house for your father when she passed. And that, that brings me on to why I've asked you here today.
Ah, yes, Pearl. Yes. She's mentioned in the will, isn't she? £5,000, I believe, left on the estate. That's what it says in the will, right?
If you're referring to the will which I drew up and sent you a copy of early in the week, yes, £5,000. Your father certainly believed in having the last word in an argument, didn't he?
Yes, I found that out the hard way on more than one occasion. Anyway, I was wondering if we might vary that particular clause. £5,000 for a housekeeper sounds a bit much to me.
And why would you say that?
Well, she received a generous severance package in lieu of serving notice. Now, I don't know if my father quite realised how well Pearl would be remunerated through her entitlements. And you know, he would have been about 80 when he wrote the will. Couldn't we claim he, wasn't meant to be all there?
Well, Marcus, I think that would be a very difficult claim to prove. I certainly wouldn't advise you to go down that particular road.
All right, well, I mean, she certainly could have exerted a bit of unfair influence on him. I mean, he was pretty fragile, wasn't he? Maybe there was a bit of elder abuse going on.
Well, again, that would be very difficult to prove.
I'm not suggesting we give her nothing. Maybe just cut the amount down to, say, half. And, I'd like her to vacate the premises as soon as possible, please. I moved in after the funeral, expecting she'd be gone more or less immediately. And, you know, she's being a little evasive with me on the date of her departure. Could you write a letter to that effect?
I'm afraid, Marcus, things are a little more complicated than that.
What do you mean?
Yesterday I received a letter from Mrs. Tyndon's lawyers requesting that you vacate the house as soon as possible.
What?
They further advise that in her capacity as executor of your father's estate, that Mrs. Tyndon is prepared to distribute to you a sum from the residual estate to the value of £5,000 in accordance with his wishes, But the latter, however, is contingent upon you vacating the house within 5 days.
What the hell does all that mean?
Well, in effect, Mrs. Tyndall is contesting your right to your father's estate.
Is this true? I mean, what's she trying to do, eh? She's not the executor of the will, obviously. I am. I mean, it says so in black and white in the will.
And that precisely is the problem. What problem? Well, the problem is that the will to which you refer is, strictly speaking, not the will, but rather a will.
What do you mean by that?
Mrs. Tyndall is also in receipt of a will, a very different will, and the will which she's provided me with, given me a copy, stipulates that she is the executor of the will and nominates her as the beneficiary of wealth. Pretty much your father's entire estate, with the exception of the aforementioned £5,000 stipulated to go to you in her version of the will.
This is ridiculous. I mean, I'm his son! She's just an employee. I mean, it's my right to my inheritance. I mean, it's the right in the eyes of the law, isn't it?
Well, in my opinion, this will is as watertight as any I've seen.
But, I mean, I can't contest it though, can't I? I mean, I am his living blood relation after all. I mean, that's got to account for something, surely.
Well, Mrs. Tyndall is also claiming to have carried out a clandestine de facto relationship with your father for the last 30 years.
What?
In effect, she's claiming to be your father's living partner.
No! No way! This is impossible. 30 years? And what about my mother then? I mean, she was alive for a part of that time. I mean, you know, my mother, she'd never do anything.
Marcus, if I could interrupt you there. As part of her evidence of a relationship with your father, Mrs. Tyndall has kindly provided me with a letter. So, please sit down. Signed, dated, allegedly in your mother's handwriting, if I may quote, "Thank you so much, Mrs. Tyndall, for servicing Donald's needs whilst keeping up with all your other household chores. Saved me a tremendous amount of bother in the boudoir. The man, as you must by now realise, is insatiable. Keep up the good work. If you can give his pipes a thorough clearing out 3 times a week, it would be appreciated. Cheers, Mrs. L." Unquote.
Oh my God. Pearl? Dad?
Well, I did make some discreet inquiries amongst other past and present members of your household staff. I've got a list here. The gardener, Mr. Bernard Hobson, the cook, Nola Sugden, the handyman, Samuel Potter, and in particular, I would draw your attention to the testimony of the window cleaner, one Arnold Snipe, who's given a particularly graphic account of what he witnessed atop his ladder on several occasions.
Mr. Please. I don't want to know. I really don't want to know.
And so it would appear that Mrs. Pearl Angel Magdalene Madonna Tyndall is in effect your father's de facto partner. Hello, Samantha. Could you bring in a cup of tea for Mr. Lovejoy, and let's make it a strong one.
So where do we go from here? I suppose you're going to say that I have to negotiate with that awful woman.
Well, that would be my advice under normal circumstances in these situations, yes. However, there is a further complication.
Another complication?
Yes, Marcus, please excuse me sounding a little coarse, but did you know that your father had what we used to call in the good old days a mistress?
What? Are you trying to suggest that I suspect anything about him and Pearl?
No. I'm speaking of your father's the other woman, I suppose you call it.
No, you can't be serious.
Marcus, I'm always serious during office hours.
I can't believe this is happening.
Well, I see that this shocks you, and I am exceedingly sorry to be the one to bring it to you.
The horny old goat! I mean, the licentious, degenerate...
Marcus, please, let us not speak ill of the dead.
Oh, it's all right for you, isn't it, Mr. Littleworth? I mean, it's not your father who's been exposed as a horny sleazebag. Oh, and don't tell me, I suppose suppose this other woman also got him to sign a will before he kicked the bucket.
Miss Tatiana Nikorov is in receipt of the will. This will claims to revoke all previous wills and testamentary disposition made by your father. Now, once again, Miss Nikorov is also offering you the sum of £5,000 in accordance with his wishes, again on the understanding that you vacate the house within 5 days as stipulated in her version of the will.
Well, that's very generous of Mrs. Nikorov, isn't it, eh? Why don't you write her a letter on my behalf telling her where she can shove her alleged will?
Marcus, as your solicitor, I would advise that a more circumspect approach is warranted. Now, once again, the window cleaner, Mr. Snipe, has stepped forward to corroborate all this with another toe-curling account of what he had witnessed through your father's office windows on a number of occasions.
Bloody hell, Snipe again?
Yes, the very same. As I say, another toe-curling account.
Wait a minute. Can't we do something? Can we just go away? We could bribe Arnold Snoop, make him, forget what he's seen.
Snipe?
No, I mean Snoop. That man's an interfering rubberneck. I've taken an instant disliking to him.
Well, I'm very sorry to hear that, but even without Snipe's testimony, I'm afraid the weight of evidence is still against us.
What, so you're suggesting we cut a deal with her?
Now, that would be my advice under normal circumstances. However, there are some further complications.
Mr. Littlewood, please. I would be very grateful if you would stop using that word complications around me, if at all possible, on account of my blood pressure going through the roof every time you say it.
I'm sorry, Marcus. I am trying to make this as easy for you as I can. Unfortunately, it falls to me as your legal advisor to apprise you of the various difficulties surrounding your father's estate.
Surely it can't get any worse.
Well, you think so.
For the love of God, I mean, just come out with it.
Right, well, brace yourself. As you know, your father likes to travel overseas for most of his life, twice a year on average. More often than not to Thailand, occasionally to Vietnam.
Yes. God, I mean, he had business interests in both countries, didn't he?
Well, I suppose you could call them interests of a transactional nature.
Mr. Littleworth, please, I hope you're not trying to suggest what I think you're trying to suggest.
I'm rather afraid that I am.
God, not another mistress!
Marcus, I see that you're upset. Would you like I get you a brandy, perhaps, for medicinal purposes?
Yes, the brandy would be very nice, thank you. Yes, and I'm feeling very faint.
Samantha? Yes, would you cancel the order for the cup of tea, Mr. Lovejoy? Could you instead bring a large brandy? Yes, and Samantha, one for me too.
Do you know, I really don't know what to say, except to conclude that my father was a sick man. And I'm not referring to his heart, I'm referring to his over-the-top, out-of-control, monstrous libido. I mean, he should have seen a psychiatrist or doctor or something. Well, whatever the male version of nymphomania is, that's what he had.
Well, I'm no expert on matters sexual, but I think the term you're referring to is satyriasis, excessive and uncontrolled male sexual behaviour. But, Marcus, I would remind you that your mother not only knew of your father's indiscretions, certainly with the household staff, but she actively encouraged them. And now, there's something else I have to tell you.
What? Another complication?
Yes.
Oh, fire away, Mr. Littleworth. Nothing can shock me anymore.
Really? Very well. I have reason to believe that the reason that your mother encouraged your father's various indiscretions was that she, too, was indulging in dalliances. Several of them, in fact.
Now, Mr. Littleworth, you go too far. My mother, the woman who bore me, raised me, made me the man I am today, what, having it off with lovers?
Well, once again, we rely on the testimony from an unimpeachable source. I am, of course, referring to the indefatigable Mr. Arnold Snipe.
No! Again? Do you know, it's as if nothing of significance ever happened in my household without him being up a ladder to watch it.
Well, it certainly seems that way, doesn't it? I mean, it's a very fine line between window cleaner and peeping Tom. Mr. Snipe seems to cross that line at will. Nonetheless, in this particular case, Mr. Snipe seems to have taken a more active role in the proceedings.
What do you mean by that?
I mean that Mr. Snipe and your mother.
Yes.
Your mother and Mr. Snipe.
Yes.
Oh dear, this is proving to be a little more difficult than I thought. Perhaps it's easier if I just quote you from an extract from Mr. Snipe's work diary, which he was rather generous enough to provide me with. It's dated 5th of March 1976. Exterior windows plus greenhouse, standard charge. Mrs. L's bedroom, interior window, standard charge. Doing the business with Mrs. L, extra charge premium rate.
What are you trying to infer?
Well, to put it in Mr. Snipe's own crude but unambiguous terms, he was whopping it to your mother on a fortnightly basis and being remunerated for it too.
Not mother! She would never stoop so low, Mr. Littleworth. Mr. Littleworth, you said my mother had several lovers.
Yes, I did say that, didn't I? Yes. Very well. I suppose I could corroborate one other. I mean, if you really insist.
Oh, I insist. Let's burst this separating boil once and for all. Come on, better out than in.
Right. Well, the other was me.
You?
Yes, me, Marcus. I was having an affair with your mother. Please.
You? Mr. Littleworth? My father's trusted legal advisor? How could you?
It was actually quite easy. I mean, bearing in mind that, you know, at that point they were leading relatively separate lives. I mean, these days I suppose you call it kind of conscious uncoupling, I suppose.
And how would you describe their promiscuous random rutting with domestic staff, not to mention legal advisors? Unconscious coupling, perhaps?
No, I think you'd refer to that as polyamorous or overlapping relation. Anyway, back to matters legal. I'm afraid I have one final difficulty. What would that be? Right. Well, you may remember Mrs. Tyndon, your father's de facto partner. She is saying that she's going to test any claim you may make on the will by questioning your paternity. She claims that on a number of occasions both Donald and Prudence told her that the man that you think of as your father is in fact father in name only.
Donald was not my dad.
It would appear not. No.
Then who?
Now, I can tell you with every confidence that your real father was, well, is...
Dad?
What?
Dad!
Good God! Me? No, your begetter, your progenitor, your paterfamilias, your daddy is none other than Arnold Snipe! Arnold Snipe, yes, the eyewitness to all things, the window cleaner come voyeur.
Well, there you go. It's okay. I mean, my father was not an investment banker after all. He was a creepy window cleaner. Oh no. That must mean I'm also out of an inheritance.
It doesn't bode well for your claim on the estate, does it?
How can't I get just a little bit of the inheritance? You know, just a small amount.
We are giving 10% to the more far-flung mistresses and 10% to your father's children.
Did you just say children?
Yes, I omitted to mention that, didn't I? You may or may not be delighted to hear that you have several half-brothers and sisters. Or rather you don't, because Donald's not your real father. Oh, this is very difficult. Well, I suppose your inheritance would be, let's see, less 7% legal fees discounted to 5, say as a matter of goodwill, would leave you somewhere in the region of £5,000.
Did you just say 5,000?
Marcus? Marcus? Hello, Samantha. Yes, could you cancel the order for the brandy for Mr. Lovejoy? And could you instead call an ambulance? Yes, and after that, could you raise an invoice for half an hour at the concessional rate? And also the reading, research and advice on 5 wills. Yes, 5 wills. Oh, and Samantha, could you make sure that the invoice comes into well in excess of £5,000?
In Where There's a Will by Mark Kolotas.